deep dive. Today, we're really getting into a country's strategic plan for transformation. Our mission really is to look at how one country, Uganda, is trying to methodically, weave its way out of depending so heavily on imports and instead build up a resilient, self-sustaining industrial base. We've got the raw trade data right here, a very, very specific training project plan, and actually a pretty compelling historical parallel to guide us.
Yeah, and that's the fundamental challenge, isn't it, for so many developing economies? How do you move beyond just, well, buying everything from abroad and actually start making things, diversified manufacturing? And we're zoning in on these foundational industries because, frankly, you can't skip them. They're the necessary building blocks. Specifically, we're talking plastics, that's HS code 39, and cleaning products, HS 34. You really have to get these basics right before tackling the bigger stuff.
Okay, right. So let's anchor this with the numbers, the cold hard facts for Uganda. Looking at the overall picture, all products between 2013 and 2023. Well, it tells a pretty familiar story, a challenging one, imbalance. Just in 2023, you see imports hitting, $11.78 billion? Huge number, but exports way behind it, only $6.3 billion.
The scale of the, let's call it financial leakage, it's just stark. If you calculate that import-export coverage ratio, basically, how much do your exports actually pay for your imports-Uganda's ratio for everything combined? It was only 53.52% in 2023.
Just over half. So can you unpack that deficit a bit more? What does that mean practically day to day when only half your imports are covered?
Well, it means for every, say, $100 Uganda spends bringing goods in, only about $53 comes back from goods it sells out. That other $47, it has to come from somewhere else. Foreign borrowing, maybe aid, foreign investment. And this leads directly to what economists call a consistently negative current account deficit, the CAD. In 2023, that deficit was almost $5.5 billion. That's billion with a B. That's the massive economic hole this whole industrial strategy is trying to plug.
Okay, wow. So now let's zoom right in on the two sectors we're focusing on today. First up, plastics, HS 39. The reliance on imports here looks, well, dramatic. In 2023, plastic imports were over $500 million, $558.42 million. But exports, barely a blip, $60.91 million.
Yeah, that's a real vulnerability, isn't it? The IE ratio for plastics, specifically in 2023, a tiny 10.91%. They're essentially buying almost everything in this category from outside. The CAD just for plastics was nearly $500 million, negative $497.5 million. It's just not sustainable to rely so heavily on others for materials that, let's face it, are needed in almost every other part of the economy.
But then, okay, we switch gears to cleaning products, HS 34, and the numbers tell a very different story. Imports in 2023 were about $50.7 million, but exports were surprisingly strong, almost $38 million, $37.98 million to be exact.
And this is the crucial data point. This is what seems to be informing the entire national strategy. Look at the import-export coverage ratio here, 74.92% in 2023. Much, much better. Now, there's still a deficit, yes, about $12.7 million, but that significantly higher coverage shows they have a much stronger footing, a domestic capacity that's already quite established compared to plastics.
Okay, so that brings up the big strategic question, doesn't it? They're struggling so much with plastics, imports are huge. Why choose cleaning products where they're already, three-quarters of the way there as the core starting point for this big industrial push? Why not just attack the weakest link head on?
It's about using existing strength to build momentum. You don't want to start with a completely cold engine, right? The strategy is called the industrialization weave. Think about it. Cleaning products are consumer staples. Everyone needs soap, detergent, disinfectant, pretty much every day. Demand is relatively stable, less prone to economic ups and downs. So they're designated as the core sector. The idea is, if you secure production of these essentials, it naturally forces the development of other key industrial branches step by step.
A controlled sequence, then. And I see this term in the documents. They call it an incremental approach using a drip-feed incentive system. Oh, that sounds quite technical. Can you break down how that drip-feed thing actually, works in practice?
Sure. Traditional big industrial projects often need massive, massive upfront cash for heavy stuff, which can be risky and inefficient, especially with limited funds. The drip feed idea is different. It provides financial support and incentives only to the very next logical step in the chain. And crucially, only after the previous step has proven itself, shown it can meet domestic demand and start scaling up.
So it's giving specific priority based on actual demonstrated demand, not just hoping.
Precisely. You invest first in helping the soap maker succeed and grow. Then, once those soap makers are booming and need, say, millions of bottles, that creates urgent, real demand for packaging. Then, that demand justifies and gets the next drip of investment, this time into plastics and recycling. The state isn't just guessing where to put money, it's funding a verified market pull. And this process eventually is what forces the development of the heavier stuff, the CNC machining, the iron processing, because you need those to make the complex molds and the automated production lines.
Okay, that mechanism, the sequence, makes sense. But let's circle back to this idea of cleaning products acting as a synergy engine.
Hmm.
How does making, household soap and bleach actually drive demand for high-tech stuff? The research report mentions 4 key upstream sectors it pulls along.
Right, the first is the chemical industry. When you start seriously scaling up production of not just basic soap, but specialized things like industrial degreasers or water softeners, you need more sophisticated chemical inputs. It creates demand for new molecules, greener raw materials, and it pushes for local chemical R&D.
Okay, give us a concrete example maybe. Are we talking just basic bulk chemicals, or does it push towards more advanced research, like for specific enzymes or something?
It starts with the basics, sure, like surfactants.
Mhm.
But as the local cleaning product market gets more competitive and sophisticated, manufacturers need better, cheaper, locally sourced ingredients. That internal market pressure is what forces the chemical guys to invest in more advanced stuff, maybe developing specialized enzymes for better stain removal, or creating unique, cost-effective fragrance compounds right there instead of importing everything. It builds that R&D muscle.
Got it. Okay, what's the second sector this engine pulls forward?
Second is the plastics sector itself. Cleaning products need decent packaging bottles, caps, triggers. It has to be chemically resistant, strong enough, look good on the shelf, and be cheap. This demand forces local plastics companies to get good at more advanced techniques. Things like complex blow molding for those big-shaped detergent bottles, or really high-precision injection molding for tricky parts, like sprayer triggers or child-proof caps. It just raises the whole technical game for the plastics guys.
And I guess if you need those really specific plastic parts, you need the tools to make them.
Exactly. That's the third sector, the machinery, mold, and automation industry. To make those complex, high-quality plastic molds, you absolutely need local expertise in advanced CNC machining. That's high-precision, computer-controlled cutting. Plus, if you want to produce cleaning products at scale enough to supply the region, maybe you need automation. Automated filling machines, capping machines, packaging lines. You can't make millions of bottles of detergent by hand. And eventually that machinery needs maintenance, repair, and ideally you start building some of it domestically too.
Makes sense. And the final piece of this synergy puzzle.
The fourth piece is recycling and the circular economy. Think about the sheer amount of plastic packaging needed if you're making cleaning products for millions of people, potentially across the region. That volume creates an urgent need to develop infrastructure for collecting used plastic, sorting it, and processing it back into usable material. It helps turn plastic waste, which is usually a cost and an environmental problem, into an actual industrial resource. It starts to close that economic loop.
Okay, so this whole strategic vision, it's not just on paper. It's being put into action through this really interesting educational model, the Plastics and Cleaning Products Manufacturing School project.
Hmm.
Tell us a bit about the training process. It seems designed to create, well, actual entrepreneurs, not just technicians.
Yeah, the whole philosophy behind the school seems very practical, very focused on open technical knowledge transfer. It's explicitly designed to produce either highly skilled workers who really understand the whole process, or, perhaps more importantly, people who can actually start their own manufacturing businesses, industrial entrepreneurs. The training itself sounds pretty comprehensive. So it's with solid theoretical grounding from experienced pros, then manufacturing tests to make sure they've got the basics down.
But the real differentiator seems to be that practical phase, right?
Absolutely. The students who pass the initial stages move into a one-week practical production training. And here's the key bit. They work as an employee, producing actual, real products that will be sold. And critically, they don't just mix stuff in vats, they get involved in the sales process too. The goal isn't just learn how to make soap, it's learn how to run a soap business, understand the market, get customer feedback, the whole 9 yards.
And that links directly into how the school itself is meant to stay afloat financially.
It does. It's designed to be self-funding, more or less. The plan is for its operating costs to be covered by selling the very products the students make during training. That's the 11 different cleaning items and the 7 plastic recycling products listed in the curriculum. It's meant to be an economic engine itself, not just an academic exercise.
Right, and looking at the curriculum details really shows the practical scope. For the listener, on the cleaning side, it's not just basic soap. It covers surface cleaner, bleach, dish detergent, liquid hand soap, glass cleaner. but also more specialized stuff like water softener, scale remover, grout cleaner, carpet shampoo, degreaser, even cologne. Quite a range.
And the plastic side is just as practical and targeted. It covers classifying plastics, dealing in scrap, general recycling techniques, yes, but also advanced injection molding specifically for things like bottle caps. And then there's critical training in blow molding, both general and specifically for making those large containers, the 5-liter, 10-liter, 20-liter, and 30-liter jerrycans.
Why the specific intense focus on those big jerrycans? What's special about them?
Because that's often a major logistics bottleneck in import cost. Those containers are absolutely essential for transporting everything: water, fuel, cooking oil, chemicals, even the raw materials for the cleaning products themselves. Importing stacks of empty, bulky, but durable, high-quality jerrycans is expensive and adds significantly to that trade deficit we talked about. So mastering their production locally, making them strong and affordable, is actually a really foundational step in securing the whole industrial supply chain.
Okay, let's zoom back out now to the massive regional opportunity here. Uganda's location is pretty central, right? Within the CFTA, COMESA, the EAC trade blocs, and the African Continental Free Trade Area, the FCFTA, that's aiming to create this single market, what is it, $3.4 trillion, 1.4 billion people. The projections are huge, like boosting intra-African manufacturing exports by over 80%.
That scale is absolutely the endgame here. We're talking about a potentially enormous and currently underserved regional market right on Uganda's doorstep. Just look at the numbers again. If you add up the total imports of just cleaning products and plastics by all the FCFTA member countries in 2023, that figure was over $30 billion. $30.1 billion. Uganda's current production capacity, as we saw, is tiny compared to that regional demand. If they could capture even a small slice of that regional import bill by producing competitively, it would be completely transformative for their economy.
Now, this level of detailed state-involved planning, it immediately made me think of the historical parallel we found in the source materials. The Turkish first 5-year industrial plan, way back from 1934 to 1938.
It's a really striking parallel, isn't it? That Turkish plan was a very pragmatic, state-driven response. The policy was called devletçilik, basically state-led development or state intervention. And it came about because of two massive pressures: the global fallout from the 1929 Great Depression and this persistent trade deficit Turkey had been running pretty much since its founding, from 1923 right up to 1929. The state had to step in and act as the main engine for industrial growth.
And their core principle sounds identical to what Uganda seems to be doing now: aggressive import substitution.
It was exactly the same underlying philosophy, focused squarely on basic things people need, everyday consumption goods that you can ideally make using your own domestic raw materials. For Turkey, then, the core sector was textiles and clothing. That accounted for almost half, 49.9% of the entire plan's investment. They weren't trying to build, fancy cars or airplanes right off the bat. They were focused on making fabric, making clothes, things everyone needed. And the state set up a civic entity, Bank, which acted almost like the central command center, coordinating this whole industrial push.
So the parallel isn't just about the strategy, it's about the results, too. Did it actually work? Did it shift Turkey's trade balance?
Oh, the results were pretty remarkable, especially given the global context of the time. This planned state-led approach successfully flipped Turkey's trade balance. They went from that chronic deficit between 23 and 29 to achieving a consistent trade surplus every year from 1930 right through 1937. And it wasn't just trade. GDP per capita also saw significant growth. It went from about $47.50 back in 1923 to nearly $89 by 1938. You calculate that out, it represents an average annual growth rate of about 8%, which was pretty impressive for that era.
Wow, okay. That economic data really drives the point home, so the historical lesson seems clear. You prioritize these essential, basic consumer goods, the 1930s equivalent of today's soap and plastic bottles, and that success creates the foundation. It builds the structure, the momentum, the skills you need to eventually climb up to the heavier, more complex industrial levels.
Exactly. The structure works because when you establish solid production in these basic areas, you generate real, undeniable internal market demand for the next level up. Demand for the specific chemicals, demand for the better machinery, demand for the precision molds, demand for workers with the right skills. It's this foundation, built carefully on everyday staples, that gives a country a fighting chance to eventually tackle things like complex CNC machining or iron processing without the whole effort collapsing because there's no real domestic market or expertise to support it yet.
So we've taken quite a journey in this deep dive. We started with the frankly, stark reality of Uganda's trade deficit, particularly in plastics. Then we unpack this really strategic decision to use cleaning products of relative strength as the initial lever to kickstart broader industrial growth, pulling those four key upstream sectors along with it. We looked at that unique, very hands-on training school model designed to create entrepreneurs. And finally, we saw the massive regional market potential and the powerful historical validation from Torchy's experience in the 1930s.
Which leaves us with a final thought, really a question for you, the listener, to mull over as you think about this data and this strategy. If the real objective isn't just tinkering around the edges, not just slightly reducing imports, but building a genuinely robust, diversified domestic industry that can eventually compete in complex manufacturing, does this approach, starting with the absolute basics, the consumer staples, and methodically using that success to trigger growth in chemicals, plastics, machinery, recycling, does that represent maybe the only truly viable pragmatic path forward? Is building from the soap up the necessary route to eventually reach the capacity for things like advanced machining and metal processing? What's the equivalent of the soap in your own country's context? Something to think about.